Chosen one. Have you noticed it lately? That unshakable stirring in your soul, like something unseen is pulling you toward a greater becoming. You may not have words for it yet, but you've felt it in the quiet moments, in the restless nights, in the way you've never quite fit into a world obsessed with survival, while your spirit longs to build something eternal. This message didn't arrive by chance. It's divine timing. You were led here, handpicked by heaven for a reason bigger than what you've been taught to believe. You're not just being positioned for success, you are being anointed for impact. And yes, that impact includes wealth, but not the kind that fades, the kind that heals, liberates, and transforms everything it touches. Have you ever asked yourself why mediocrity made you feel numb, even when everyone else seemed satisfied? Why, no matter how hard you tried to blend in, you still carried a sense of sacred disruption? It's because you were never meant to follow the world's blueprint. You are here to create one, fueled not just by money, but by Mantle. And here's the truth the enemy hoped you'd never realize. You are about to become the first in your bloodline to carry divine wealth with divine purpose, not to hoard, not to flaunt, but to free yourself, your family, your generation. Before we dive deeper, I want to sincerely thank every single one of you who has supported this journey through Super Thanks. Whether you've given or simply shown up with your heart open, your presence matters. Your faith is a seed, and heaven is already watering it. Now, if you feel this word awakening something in you, don't wait. Comment 777 below right now. That number isn't random, it's a prophetic declaration. It says, I'm aligned, I'm alert, I'm ready. And I have to ask, what will you do when the wealth arrives, but it calls you to serve instead of shine? Will you recognize the blessing even when it comes dressed as responsibility? Because this is more than money, this is mantle, this is mission, and your name is written on both. We're about to uncover 8 divine revelations, each one revealing why you were never meant to chase riches, but to inherit sacred provision. Not everyone will have the depth to finish this message, but those who do, you won't just leave with strategy, you'll leave with confirmation, activation, and prophetic insight that shifts your very DNA. So take a breath, lean in, replay this as often as your spirit needs, because you're not just being blessed, you're being entrusted. Let's begin. God's chosen ones, you're about to be the first millionaire carrying a divine mantle. You didn't just happen upon this life, chosen one. You were commissioned. Your arrival on this earth wasn't a coincidence. It was a divine deployment. And though the world may have called you ordinary, your existence has never been anything close to average. Can you remember the moments you felt out of place? Not because you were lacking, but because your spirit was layered in dimensions this world couldn't yet recognize. Have you ever wondered why you never quite fit in? Even in the rooms you were trained to enter, even when the noise of poverty, chaos, or limitation tried to drown your purpose, there was something inside you that refused to fold, a divine flicker, a sacred signal, a whisper that said, "This is not all there is." That whisper wasn't your imagination, it was your instruction. Even before you could speak in full sentences, the blueprint was already humming within you. Have you ever felt a strange sense of knowing things before they happened? You weren't born empty-handed. You came marked with a spiritual design that even you couldn't fully decode yet. Heaven didn't just send you, heaven equipped you. Do you ever feel guided by something you can't explain, yet can't ignore? You carried a holy signature, an invisible architecture etched into your soul like a cathedral blueprint sketched by God's own hand. And while others looked for directions outside themselves, you were being pulled by a compass embedded deep in your being. This map wasn't common, it wasn't passed out to everyone. It was given only to those who could bear the weight of walking paths unseen, like Jeremiah, whom God told, "Before I formed you in the womb I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Jeremiah 1:5. Can you feel the truth in those words, like they were written for you too? You were set apart, not because you were perfect, but because you were purposed. You saw what money could do, how it twisted people, distorted relationships, and turned dreams into battlegrounds. Maybe you watched your parents argue through walls too thin to muffle the ache. Maybe you learned how to translate silence into survival. Maybe you saw your community normalize struggle and call it loyalty. But even in the tightest corners you asked, is this really all there is to life? What kind of child asks that question? One who remembers, one who was born knowing more. That question was rebellion, and it was holy. Let me tell you about Matteo, a young man who grew up in a single-bedroom apartment with 6 siblings. He sold sodas on the street corner by age 8 and watched his mother work double shifts just to keep food on the table. By the time he was 25, he had already been told by 3 teachers he wasn't university material. But what they didn't see was that Matteo had something rare: vision. Have you ever felt underestimated, like people only saw your current condition but not your calling? He used his spare time to study financial literacy from books he borrowed. Today, he owns a chain of organic food stores. "I didn't inherit wealth," he says. "I inherited grit, and God gave me direction." And Matteo isn't alone. Consider Howard Schultz, the visionary former CEO of Starbucks, who turned a humble coffee house into a global symbol of community and resilience. He grew up in public housing in Brooklyn, watching his father struggle with low-paying, unstable jobs. He once said, "I saw my parents go through terrible experiences, and I wanted to climb out of that." That holy discontent led him to build Starbucks, not just as a coffee company, but as a vision of community, dignity, and global impact. He didn't come from wealth. He came from a whisper that said, "There's more than this." Sound familiar? Your story might not be Matteo's or Howard's, but if you're honest, you've always known your ending wouldn't match your beginning. Have you ever looked at your past and realized it didn't predict your future? It prepared it. What's been buried in your life isn't dead. It's divine timing in disguise. Just like Joseph, betrayed by brothers and locked in prison, yet destined to feed nations. Genesis 50:20 reminds us, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." You weren't cursed by your hard beginnings. You were cultivated. Have you ever seen an olive tree? It takes years, sometimes decades, before it produces its richest oil. But when it does, that oil heals wounds, lights lamps, and anoints kings. Have you ever thought that maybe your delays were never denials, but divine distillation? That's what your process has been doing, quietly, faithfully. Underneath the soil of your setbacks, the oil has been forming. And now, chosen one, the pressure is starting to reveal the promise. Can you feel it? The trembling in your spirit, the turning of a page only heaven could write. And hear this again, with deeper clarity. You weren't drawn to wealth because you were chasing status. You were drawn because you were carrying purpose too heavy to fulfill without provision. There was always a difference. Have you ever wondered why the idea of prosperity never sat in your spirit as something selfish but sacred? Why it didn't feel like chasing riches but retrieving resources for something higher? That wasn't delusion. That was divine insight. Because money in the hands of the chosen isn't greed, it's governance. It's not just a deposit, it's a declaration of God's trust in your stewardship. You've never just dreamed of making it out. Your soul longed to make a dent, to break the mold, to disrupt the patterns, to shift entire frequencies in places where only survival once echoed. You've felt it, haven't you? That ache in your chest when you saw someone stuck in the same system you escaped. That fire in your gut when someone said, "This is just how it is." It wasn't ambition, it was assignment. You weren't born just to survive in a house. You were born to build homes that breathe healing into entire neighborhoods. You weren't born to receive a paycheck. You were born to write checks to single mothers trying to hold the line, to fund visionaries who've been faithful but invisible. You were born to fund freedom, not flee from lack, because poverty was never your portion. It was your training ground. Remember Nehemiah, a cupbearer, not a builder. Yet when he heard that Jerusalem's walls lay in ruins, something broke inside him, and from that holy ache he rose up to rebuild. Nehemiah 2:18 says, "I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me, and they said, 'Let us rise up and build.'" That's what this moment feels like. You're not just carrying wealth, you're carrying the blueprint for restoration. Let me tell you about Clara, a former foster child who once shared a single pair of shoes with her sister. Today she runs a foundation that builds transitional homes for aging out youth. "We weren't just poor," she said, "assis dachiatin, sansasatisa." We were invisible. Now I get to write checks that make people visible again. That's not luck, that's a divine mantle at work. And think of Viola Davis, one of the few actresses to win the triple crown of acting. Oscar, Emmy, Tony, yet born in extreme poverty in South Carolina, living in apartments infested with rats and filled with hunger. She once said, "I didn't have a bed until I was 18, but I had imagination. I had God. I had a calling I couldn't explain." What she built was not fame, it was sacred restoration. Her wealth today isn't just income, it's impact, it's advocacy, it's proof that divine placement can arise from devastating places. You see, money didn't avoid your life before because you were cursed. It dodged you because God was still installing the architecture. You weren't in a season of cash flow, you were in a season of capacity building. God had to make sure your hands could hold what your heart was praying for. That's why some jobs broke you, some friendships drained you, some seasons left you with nothing but a prayer. Because God wasn't trying to spoil you with success, He was teaching you sacred strategy. The world would have handed you money with no morals. God gave you wisdom first, because when you show up now, you don't just arrive with charisma, you arrive cloaked in mantle. It's why the atmosphere changes when you enter the room, not because of what you say, but because of who sent you. Let me tell you about Marcus, a quiet janitor who used to clean the lobby of a corporate firm at night. What no one knew was that he was also designing eco-sustainable city blueprints in his tiny apartment after hours. One day, a CEO noticed one of his sketches accidentally left behind. 3 years later, Marcus is head of their sustainability division. Why? Because what he built in the dark was always meant for the light. You've built things not for applause, but from assignment. You've carried visions not to elevate your ego, but to honor your anointing. And now you've become the builder the blueprint has been waiting for. Your steps no longer echo uncertainty. They move with the cadence of calling. You carry something ancient in your bones, the kind of wisdom that's been sharpened by experience and wrapped in reverence, the kind of knowing that walks silently but shifts systems. Imagine a volcano, silent for decades. Beneath the surface, pressure builds, foundations shift, molten strength gathers in chambers unseen, until one day, without announcement, eruption releases transformation. That's you now. Not destruction, but divine disruption. Now, the Most High looks at you and says, "I can trust you, not because you proved yourself to people, but because you proved faithful in silence, because you tithed from your last crumbs, because you refused the shortcut that cost your soul, because you said no to fast money and yes to slow obedience. And now heaven whispers what your heart longed to hear. You're ready. Before God trusted you with overflow, He entrusted you with emptiness. Chosen one, this was not a punishment. This was a proving ground. Before you were trusted to carry millions, you had to first learn how to carry lack, with dignity, with discipline, and with depth. You weren't just walking through financial hardship, you were walking through sacred formation. And though the world saw you lose, heaven saw you learn. Have you ever asked why your breakthrough took so long, why your harvest was delayed while others reaped quickly? It wasn't because you were disqualified, it was because you were being distilled. God wasn't ignoring you, He was refining you. You weren't forgotten, you were being forged, because there's a kind of wisdom only found in the furnace of lack. And that wisdom was your inheritance before wealth ever arrived. Remember Joseph, imprisoned for years before managing Egypt's treasury. The very man whose dreams were laughed at became the one stewarding a nation's survival. Genesis 41:39-40. Why? Because God doesn't elevate those who haven't been educated by endurance. And you, chosen one, were in the classroom of stewardship long before overflow entered the syllabus. I'll tell you about Nia Walker. She's not on magazine covers. She doesn't have a verified check, but she is a seamstress in Alabama who raised 3 children on a minimum wage. She budgeted, saved, tithed, and taught her kids how to steward small things with excellence. One of her children now runs a multi-million-dollar supply chain company. His first investor, the sewing machine she left him in her will. That's stewardship passed through sacrifice. That's generational mantle. And speaking of generational mantle, consider Oprah Winfrey, one of the most influential media moguls in the world and the first black female billionaire in history. Raised in poverty in rural Mississippi, abused as a child, and constantly overlooked. Yet, she stewarded her pain into purpose. She didn't just survive adversity, she multiplied from it. Her early setbacks didn't stop her, they refined her message. Her billions today aren't just money. They're proof that destiny honors resilience. What if your wounds were not delays but designations, signs that you were chosen to break through? Why did God let you lose first? So you could lead from a place of reverence, so you would never mistake riches for righteousness. You were taught in hiddenness how to hear God's voice in the tension between not enough and not yet. And now you understand what most millionaires never do, that money multiplies what's inside you. It does not mend what's broken in you. Do you remember the weight of checking your account and seeing red? The nights you fasted, not just for clarity, but because there was no dinner. The times you celebrated others while crying in silence? Those weren't setbacks. Those were sacred scripts. You were being rewritten. Tyler Perry, a groundbreaking filmmaker and entrepreneur who became one of Hollywood's most powerful studio owners, before his empire slept in his car, was rejected by theaters and still chose to stage plays for 5 people with the same energy as 5,000. Why? Because purpose demands consistency even when applause is absent. Like you, he was stewarding the vision when the world saw only failure. And now, he owns the stages that once denied him. Could it be that your quiet faithfulness has already begun to attract doors your voice hasn't even knocked on yet? You've done the same. You've tithed from emptiness, given when you had nothing but faith. You've turned pain into prayer, lack into loyalty, and small beginnings into sacred ground. Have you ever paused to realize how sacred your small beginnings truly were? You no longer chase money to validate your identity. You pursue wealth to fulfill divine responsibility. Jesus said in Matthew 25:23, "You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things." That's not just a reward, That's a prophecy, and it's yours now, because you've mastered what can't be taught in textbooks, the art of sacred stewardship. Could it be that your financial wisdom was birthed not in abundance, but in obedience? Let me introduce someone else to you. Mateo Alvarez, a grocery clerk from Guatemala who secretly studied finance every night after shifts. One day, after helping an elderly woman calculate her groceries, she returned a week later and introduced him to her nephew, a hedge fund manager. Today, Mateo runs a financial literacy NGO for low-income families. His rise wasn't luck. It was layered faithfulness meeting divine opportunity. Who might your obedience be quietly introducing you to next? You're now in that moment. You've buried pride. You've let go of impulsiveness. You've surrendered entitlement. And now the soil is ready. God didn't just prune your spending. He cultivated your vision. He trained your hands to release without fear and receive without guilt. How many silent seasons were really just training grounds for this very harvest? Imagine an olive tree. It takes over a decade to bear real fruit, and yet its roots grow wide and deep in silence. It survives droughts others can't. That's you. You survived seasons designed to starve you. But instead of shrinking, you stretched. You bent without breaking. And now you're about to bear fruit that tastes like favor. Could the pressure you've endured have been proof of the promise you now carry? You're not chasing a flashy life. You're craving a fruitful one. A life that funds missions, that breaks debts, that builds futures. You don't just want your name on a building. You want your fingerprints on someone's deliverance. And that's why heaven took its time. Isn't it time you recognized that the delay was actually a divine setup? Now, God is not just releasing resources, He's releasing responsibility. The mantle you carry isn't draped in gold. It's woven in sacrifice. It's lined with long nights and stitched with sacred yeses. And now, you're not just receiving wealth. You're retaining it, multiplying it, stewarding it. Are you prepared to carry what others only prayed for? Because to the world you may look like a millionaire in the making, but to heaven you are more. You are a kingdom economist, a divine distributor, a living storehouse. And every seed you sow now will echo in eternity. The test of loss is over. The lesson of overflow has begun. What if this isn't about having more, but becoming more? Let's be honest, chosen one. The real threat has never been your income. It's your inheritance. The real danger to darkness isn't your wealth. It's your weight. The weight of heaven that rests quietly on your shoulders like a garment woven in fire. You've tried to blend in. You've tried to shrink. But even your silence carries authority. When you walk into a room, something shifts. Not because of what's in your wallet, but because of what's on your life. Is it possible that the enemy feared your silence more than your shout? You may have thought it was coincidence that certain people stared longer, that atmospheres shifted, that resistance followed you more than it followed others. But no, that was the mantle speaking before you ever opened your mouth. It's the divine assignment marked in your DNA, the one the enemy recognized even before you did. And that's precisely why the warfare has been unrelenting. So now, what will you do with the mantle you can no longer deny? The enemy doesn't tremble at millionaires. He's manufactured many of them, some bought, others broken. But a mantled millionaire, one whose soul has been consecrated through wilderness and whose hands are trained for battle and building, that's a force the kingdom of darkness can't imitate, predict, or contain. Because when wealth is paired with wisdom and influence is paired with intercession, it no longer elevates just a person. It liberates entire bloodlines. And that, chosen one, is why your finances were the first to be attacked. Because your money is not for flexing, it's for freeing. It carries a mission, not just a message. That's why your identity was shaken, because your name, your voice, and your presence carry weight in the spirit realm. And your relationships? Oh, they've been sifted, because unity with the wrong person could collapse the infrastructure of what God is building through you. I want to tell you about Cardinal Antoine Richelieu, a real historical figure in 17th century France. Though a man of the cloth, he wielded massive influence in politics, shaping nations behind the scenes. He once said, "Give me 6 lines written by the hand of the most honest man, and I will find something in them to hang him." The world fears strategy. The enemy fears divine strategy even more. But unlike Richelieu's cold intellect, you are being equipped with heavenly precision, not to control, but to set captives free. You are not a threat because of your status symbols. You are a threat because of your spiritual destination. You are not dangerous because of your followers. You are dangerous because of your faith. Because once you truly saw yourself, not just as gifted but mantled, it was the beginning of the end for every curse that had stalked your family for generations. You're not here for the bag, you're here for the blueprint. You want heaven's instruction, not man's applause. You want insight that breaks patterns, not just income that breaks records. You want innovation that doesn't inflate egos, but liberates generations. And that hunger, that holy dissatisfaction, is the signal your mantle has activated. But it's only the beginning. The moment that recognition sinks into your spirit is the moment everything begins to accelerate. And now we step into the weight of what that actually means. You didn't just survive the fire, chosen one. You were forged in it. While others ran from the heat, you were shaped by it, refined not in the spotlight, but in solitude, trained not on stages, but in silence. You didn't ask for this mantle, but heaven placed it anyway, because God saw in you what man could not. And now the mantle that once felt like a private weight is about to cause a public shift. What once pressed you down is now about to lift others up. This is not ego. This is authority wrapped in assignment. What you carry isn't cosmetic, it's cosmic. You don't just influence timelines, you alter trajectories. And that's why the room reacts before you even speak. The mantle you wear holds dominion, not dominance. It doesn't shout, it governs. It whispers divine strategy into your spirit that others don't have the capacity to decode. It allows you to see patterns before they emerge. Like Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dream, Genesis 41:16, the mantle gives you insight into seasons that haven't even arrived yet, and people call you lucky when in truth you're listening. It's the mantle that causes favor to find you, not because of what you do, but because of who you've become through what you've endured. It makes demons uneasy and angels alert. It draws attention from both realms, because heaven intends to move through you and hell intends to stop you. And let's be honest, you've never quite fit in, have you? You've always felt things others didn't. You've sensed atmospheres long before they shifted. You've lost sleep over burdens no one else even noticed. You've cried tears that had no name, prayed prayers you didn't understand. That's not weakness. That's spiritual sensitivity. That's what happens when you're marked for kingdom impact, not personal convenience. I want to tell you about Isadora Khan, a financial advisor in Singapore. She was offered high-paying jobs by top corporations, but turned them down to work with widows, single mothers, and displaced youth. People thought she was foolish until a UN foundation discovered her outreach programs. Today, she oversees a multinational trust fund dedicated to rebuilding lives from the bottom up. Why? Because when the mantle guides your decisions, money follows ministry. God didn't raise you just to be wealthy. He raised you to be wise, holy, and dangerous to darkness. You're not entering boardrooms just to make deals. You're entering them to disrupt generational curses. You're not building platforms for applause. You're building underground rivers of justice, reconciliation, and redemption. Look at the early church in Acts 4:34-35. There was not a needy person among them. Those who owned lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold and laid it at the apostles' feet. That's what radical mantle-carrying generosity looks like. It's not about status, it's about sacrifice, about building ecosystems of hope in deserts of despair. And don't think for a second your money is for decoration. It's deployment. It's not meant for flexing, it's meant for fighting. Strategic spiritual warfare looks like funding safe homes for the trafficked, like printing Bibles where they're illegal, like paying off hospital bills for strangers and unlocking education for children who've been forgotten. Your mantle carries the breath of God's strategy. It multiplies what the world deems small. It reconciles what the world has written off. It restores what was shattered generations ago. Your name might not be in history books yet, but your impact is already echoing in the spirit realm. And chosen one, the moment your wealth converges with your anointing, the entire kingdom of darkness takes a loss, because now you're not just resourced, you're released. Let's be clear about something that's been stirring in your spirit for years, chosen one. This was never just about you making more money. This was about you making history. Have you ever felt deep down that what you're doing now has echoes far beyond your lifetime? You were never just born to break even. You were born to break patterns. You were never simply here to collect paychecks. You were sent to collect what the enemy stole from your bloodline. Can you sense the weight of that calling? The way it presses on you, not to crush, but to crown. Every generational wound, every whispered fear around finances, every silent sacrifice your parents made just to survive. It's all been waiting for you. And now, here you are, the first in your family line to recognize the battle for what it truly is. Not financial, but foundational. You've seen it, haven't you? The tension at the dinner table, the shame when bills came due, the quiet panic behind the smiles, the small dreams birthed from scarcity. Did you ever wonder why no one else in your family could quite name the ache you've always carried? And somewhere deep inside you whispered, I can't let this cycle continue. That whisper was the spark. That was the mantle beginning to wake up. What if that moment, the one where you quietly resolved to break free, was actually the sound of heaven commissioning you? This isn't hustle. This isn't greed. This is a holy disruption. You're not doing it for the status. You're doing it for the story. Because this time, the story doesn't end in debt. It doesn't end in struggle. It ends in legacy. Do you know how powerful it is to be the turning point in a lineage that's only ever known lack? You're not just becoming the first millionaire in your family. You're becoming the first one to do it without selling your soul. You've seen the shortcuts, the back doors, the invitations that looked golden but were laced with compromise. Have you ever stood at the edge of opportunity and felt your spirit say no, even when your wallet said yes? But you turned them down. You stayed hidden. You stayed clean. Why? Because your yes to God was louder than your fear of going without. Think of Daniel in Babylon, surrounded by wealth and power, but he refused to eat the king's defiled food. Daniel 1:8. He didn't need to play by their rules because he served a higher king. And just like him, you've chosen purity over popularity, integrity over indulgence, alignment over ambition. Have you realized how rare that kind of obedience is in today's world? I want to tell you about Luciana, an art teacher in rural Brazil. Raised by her grandmother who sold fruit to survive, she refused to let poverty define her path. Instead of chasing galleries in the city, she began painting murals on village walls, stories of hope, healing, history. One day, a documentary team stumbled upon her work. Her murals are now on UNESCO buildings. She never chased fame. She rewrote what legacy looks like. That's what you're doing. Could it be that your quiet yes is preparing to shake nations in ways noise never could? And consider LeBron James, one of the greatest athletes in modern history, raised by a single mother in poverty-stricken Akron, Ohio, and now a global philanthropist, father figure, and education pioneer. He didn't just build wealth, he built the I Promise School, offering free tuition, food, and mental health services to at-risk youth. He didn't escape the system to forget it. He turned back, re-entered it, and transformed it from the inside out. That's not just success, that's sacred reconstruction. What if the point of your overflow isn't escape but restoration? This is more than prosperity. This is prophetic reversal. God is using you to reach back through time and redeem what was broken. You are the answer to prayers whispered by ancestors who didn't even have the language for what they were crying out for. Have you ever stopped and asked yourself, am I someone's answered prayer? You are the embodied fulfillment of promises they died believing for. You're not just stepping into overflow. You're stepping into a story that was paused by poverty, choked by fear, and now continued by faith. You are the living bridge between what was cursed and what will be consecrated. What if the real reason you made it through the fire was because someone before you didn't? And God said the cycle stops with you. Do you remember the way your heart ached as a child when you saw your parents fight about money? The way you promised yourself you'd never let your future children see that? That vow wasn't childish. It was prophetic. It was the echo of destiny knocking early. And now you're answering. Have you noticed how the promises you made in pain are becoming the foundations you now build on? You are not just rewriting your financial future. You are rewriting the atmosphere of your entire family line, from anxiety to stewardship, from survival to strategy, from chasing to cultivating. And now the blueprint is no longer missing. You're holding the pen. And now, chosen one, here's the part they didn't tell you. You won't just fund futures. You'll fund them without guilt, without shrinking back, without apologizing for your overflow, because you understand something now that poverty could never teach you. True wealth isn't selfish, it's strategic. You won't just leave behind instructions on how to survive. You'll leave inheritances. You'll leave land, legacy, and language. And most of all, you'll leave behind principles that can't be taxed, stolen, or buried. Why? Because you've finally seen the truth. Real legacy isn't what you leave in their hands. It's what you plant in their hearts. You're not just building wealth. You're uprooting a disease, a spiritual virus that ran through your family like a silent plague. We can't, we won't, we never will. That defeated mentality that settled for lack and spiritualized failure, that voice is silenced now. The moment you said yes to God, the curse cracked at the root. Think of Gideon, the least in his tribe, hiding in fear, and yet God called him a mighty warrior. Judges 6:12. That's how heaven has seen you all along, not by what you came from, but by what you were called to change, and you're changing it now. You're no longer the observer, watching others rise. You're the one laying foundations on stone, not sand, not driven by fear, driven by vision. And here's the part that will confuse the enemy. You won't rise alone. When you rise, they will rise. When you break through, they will see it's possible. Your elevation will become a signal to your bloodline that the spiritual climate has shifted, that God's people can prosper without losing their soul. That holiness and ownership don't contradict each other. Let me tell you about someone you know. Michelle Obama, former First Lady of the United States, best-selling author and lifelong advocate for education and equity, a woman raised on the south side of Chicago in a cramped apartment with one bathroom. She once said, "Your story is what you have, what you will always have. It is something to own." And she didn't just rise alone. She pulled girls up with her, built scholarships, created pathways. She turned narrative into movement. And think also of Denzel Washington, an award-winning actor, director, and speaker, known not just for excellence in film, but for a deep, unwavering faith that governs his every decision. He once told a graduating class, "Put God first in everything you do. Everything that I have is by the grace of God. While others chase fame, he preaches character. While others build platforms, he builds legacy. He didn't just accumulate wealth, he aligned with wisdom. That's the kind of prosperity you're carrying too. And now you're doing the same. You are proof that a holy life is not a broke life, that you can love God, stay pure, honor people, and still own land, fund causes, and command influence. This is what righteous prosperity looks like. You are not an exception. You are a template, a blueprint being unrolled in real time. And guess what? You're the first millionaire in your lineage, but you won't be the last, because the mantle on your life carries multiplication, and anything marked by God multiplies. It will flow like a river that waters your children's dreams, your community's dry places, your calling's full unfolding. You're about to raise a generation that doesn't just make money. They move mountains. You'll model what freedom looks like, freedom in finance, in emotion, in spirit. And people will follow the road you cleared, not just because of what you built, but because of how you built it, with God as your architect. Do you know the difference between a dam and a river? A dam contains. A river flows. You were never meant to hoard. You were meant to move. Your wealth will be a current, not a container, because what's in you is not just provision, it's prophecy. This isn't hype. This isn't luck. This is heaven's rewriting in motion. You are the first. You are the break. You are the blessing. You are the blueprint. And your story, it's not just being rewritten in ink, it's being engraved in eternity. Chosen one, take this to heart. Your next level isn't waiting for applause, it's waiting for alignment. And in this sacred season, God isn't asking for your agreement, He's demanding your obedience. Have you ever wondered why certain things you used to tolerate now feel heavy? Why silence in your spirit has grown louder than the noise of people's approval? Why you're feeling led to move in ways you can't explain, not even to those closest to you? That's not confusion, that's divine clarity. Because when heaven gives an assignment, it rarely seeks earth's opinion. You were not summoned by a committee, you were summoned by covenant. The oil on your life wasn't voted on, it was chosen by fire. You weren't handed a brand, you were handed a burden. You weren't consulted, you were called. And yes, your obedience will offend those addicted to your old version. You'll walk into places that once made you feel safe and suddenly feel unseen. You'll speak less, not because you're cold, but because your spirit has outgrown shallow explanations. You'll make decisions that look strange on paper, but make perfect sense in prayer. Remember Jonah? God told him to go to Nineveh, but he ran the other way. Jonah 1:1-3. The result? A storm that affected everyone on his ship. When you disobey divine instruction, even the people around you suffer. Your obedience isn't just about you, it's about everything connected to you. Let me tell you about Father Marcelo, a once highly respected cardinal in Brazil, who left behind his Vatican titles to build shelters for abandoned street children. People said he'd lost his mind, but when asked why, he said, "What good is position if it costs me obedience?" Today, he's quietly changed thousands of lives, while the world still tries to understand his silence. And let me share a story even closer to you, a story that could have been yours. Naila was a quiet woman from a small town who always had dreams that felt too big for her family's expectations. One day she walked away from her wedding, just a week before the ceremony, because in prayer she heard God say, "This path is safe, but it's not sacred." That obedience cost her her reputation. But 5 years later, she leads a ministry rescuing girls from arranged marriages. Her no became their rescue. Obedience might make you look unstable. It might isolate you. But heaven never needed a crowd to confirm your calling. It only needed your yes. Can you walk with God when it costs you people's understanding? Can you move with power when it leaves you without applause? Can you trust the whispers of heaven when the noise of doubt screams louder? Because this next level will not be negotiated. It will be navigated by revelation. God is about to download blueprints that defy logic. He's preparing you to receive instructions that stretch your faith, confuse your peers, and stir your spirit. You'll be asked to build when you have no blueprint, to speak when you have no script, to stand when you feel shaken. But this is your mantle moment, and your obedience is the soil that activates miracles. But let's be honest, chosen one, how could you possibly doubt him now? After everything you've walked through, every battle you were supposed to lose, every fire that tried to consume you but instead refined you. How could you think he brought you this far just to leave you here? You've survived storms that were sent to silence you. You've stood in places where logic said retreat, but faith said remain. You've prayed through nights so dark that even your tears felt invisible. And yet, here you are, still standing, still believing, still moving. Isn't that proof enough that God is still writing? But have you noticed it? The more obedient you become, the more opposition you attract. Why do you think the enemy increased the pressure just as your clarity grew sharper? Could it be because obedience is your key, and hell knows it? This next level of wealth isn't accessed through connections or credentials. It's accessed through conviction, through the kind of radical, unshakable obedience that doesn't need proof to move, just a whisper. As Hebrews 11:8 reminds us, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called, and he went out, not knowing where he was going. Let me tell you about Lena Zhang, a renowned architect from Amsterdam. At the peak of her career, she heard God tell her to leave the firm and design homes for displaced war widows in Serbia. No blueprint, no funding, just a call. People mocked her, clients abandoned her. But now, she's built sanctuaries for over 2,000 families. And when asked if she regretted walking away from the luxury, she said, "That wasn't luxury. Obedience is." Obedience won't always look glamorous, but it will always lead to glory, because you're not building for claps, you're building from covenant. And then there's Micah, a mechanic from Tennessee who gave his only car away after hearing a sermon on radical surrender. The next week, a dealership offered him a contract to design engines for eco-mission vehicles. A job that would bless not just his finances, but his city. Obedience wrote a future hustle never could. Can you still trust when it looks nothing like what you prayed for? Can you still build when the world around you doubts your blueprint? Can you still obey when everyone else is sprinting in the opposite direction? Because God is not preparing you for popularity. He's preparing you for placement. And this placement, this elevation, demands a sensitivity to his voice like never before. You will have to quiet the noise. Walk away from good ideas that aren't God's ideas. You'll have to protect your inner peace like a sacred flame, because distraction is warfare dressed in convenience. Imagine a hawk soaring high in the sky. It doesn't chase every shadow below. It rises higher, using the wind as guidance. That's you now. Obedience is your wind. You don't need to hustle when heaven is your current. And don't forget, you're not obeying out of fear. You're obeying because you know what it's like to trust God and watch him flip the script in real time. You're obeying because favor doesn't follow fear. It follows faith. And faith always walks ahead of understanding. This next level isn't going to be unlocked by sounding good. It'll be unlocked by sounding surrendered. You've graduated from trying to impress people with noise. Now, you're impressing heaven with yes. Chosen one, have you ever wondered why God let you witness the pain of lack before ever letting you touch the flow of provision? Why you were exposed so early to what brokenness looks like, what scarcity feels like, and how silence sounds when the fridge is empty, the rent is late, and the dream is fading. It wasn't to punish you, it was to prepare you for this moment. Because now heaven is shifting the narrative, and you're not just receiving wealth, you're being commissioned by it. What if the money isn't the miracle, but the mission? What if every dollar in your future is not just meant for spending, but sending people into safety, sending hope into hard places, sending revival into regions that have never known overflow? This next level isn't about luxury, it's about leverage. God is not blessing you so you can escape discomfort. He's equipping you to confront injustice. He's giving you wealth not to separate you from the world, but to engage it with strategy, mercy, and boldness. Because when kingdom wealth is placed in the hands of the righteous, it becomes a divine force of multiplication and restoration. Isaiah 58:10 says, "If you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness." And isn't that what's happening now? Your light is rising, but not so you can be admired. It's so you can illuminate paths others thought were lost forever. Do you remember what it felt like when nobody helped? When doors stayed locked no matter how many times you knocked? When your prayers were all you had left, and even those felt like whispers into a void? You weren't abandoned, you were being anointed in the hidden place. Because what God is about to place in your hands will require a heart that knows pain and still chooses purpose. Let me tell you about Celeste, a once homeless woman in Marseille who used to sleep outside of churches she now funds. After a divine encounter and months of quiet labor, she started a small soap business with just €20. Today, that business not only supports shelters for abused women, but also funds job training for refugees. She says, "I never prayed for money, I prayed for meaning. God gave me both." You carry that same spiritual DNA. And what about Alaric, a carpenter from a nameless mountain town? Years ago, with no bank account and no blueprint, he crafted handmade furniture with scriptures carved into the grain. A stranger bought one, then 10, then 100. Now his pieces sit in homes across the nation, not just as decor, but as daily declarations of faith. He tithes 40% of all profit and trains local orphans in his craft. You see, it's never about the product, it's about the impact. Your journey is sacred. You've already been chosen, but now you are being activated. Your hands are becoming vessels, your mind becoming an ark for divine ideas, your life a seedbed of miracles. And just like the roots of a tree grow downward before it breaks the soil, so have you, quietly, consistently. And now the fruit will speak. Have you noticed how some people hoard their harvest? But you're different. You never wanted to shine alone. You wanted to build tables where the hungry could feast, not just admire the silverware. That's why this wealth coming to you won't suffocate your soul. It will stretch it, awaken it, sanctify it. It will amplify your assignment. Think of the way sunlight moves through stained glass, each piece broken, colored, shaped by pressure, yet together projecting something breathtaking. That's you. That's what this divine wealth is about. Not perfection, not applause, but reflection, reflecting the light of the Most High through your obedience, sacrifice, and vision. So let the world chase riches. Let them build empires out of ego. But you, chosen one, you're building eternity with every seed you sow. You've already learned how to survive without money. You've prayed in rooms that echoed back silence. You've stretched pennies and made meals out of faith. You've sown seeds when you didn't know where the next one would come from. And yet, you're still here, stronger, wiser, more aligned. Because even in lack, you learned how to lead. And now, chosen one, God is about to let you lead with abundance, not for applause, not for aesthetics, but for assignment. The shift is not just financial, it's spiritual. This next level is not just about what you gain, it's about what you give birth to. Have you ever wondered why the attacks on your finances were so surgical, so personal? so persistent? It's because the enemy knows when money reaches your hands, it no longer serves darkness, it disrupts it. You don't hoard, you heal. You don't buy idols, you break chains. You don't flex wealth for status, you fund revival. 1 Timothy 6:18 instructs, "Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share." And that's who you've become, not just a recipient of blessings, but a release valve for heaven's overflow. Let me tell you about Rosalia, an artist and philanthropist from Spain, who, after rising from extreme poverty, committed 50% of every concert earning to building homes for single mothers. She said once in an interview, "I don't see money as mine. I see it as something borrowed from God to return multiplied." You carry that same fire in your spirit. Or take Jude, a street kid from Nairobi. He used to sell plastic bottles to feed his siblings. Then, one day, someone gave him a scholarship. He didn't waste it. He built a solar-powered water system in his slum. Today, he employs 60 people and donates all net profits to build wells across Kenya. He doesn't chase success. He creates survival for others. That's not ambition. That's anointing in motion. You're not just a wealthy person in the making. You are God's strategy wrapped in skin. You're a kingdom financier, a quiet warrior of provision, the kind that builds hospitals where others walked away, the kind that funds purpose, not popularity, the kind that sees numbers as seeds, not trophies. Let me ask you, what if your bank account was heaven's blueprint for somebody else's miracle? What if the door God is opening for you is meant to unlock 10 more for others behind you? What if the way you steward this wealth now determines how deeply generations yet unborn get to breathe? This is why the enemy tried to break you at the base, but he couldn't, because your foundation was laid on rock, not trends. You've passed the tests of scarcity, of betrayal, of wilderness delay. And now God is saying, I can trust you, not just to receive, but to release. You no longer view money as power. You see it as permission, permission to heal, to build, to restore what this world gave up on. You've become dangerous not because of what you have, but because of what you'll do with it. This isn't the season to play small. This is the season to sow boldly. You'll build homes for those who only knew instability. You'll sponsor children who would have dropped out. You'll plant gardens in food deserts. You'll restore voices, dreams, and dignity with every dollar that passes through your hands. And when they ask, how did you do it? You won't say hustle. You'll say heaven. Chosen one, have you ever wondered why your silence made people so uncomfortable? Why your patience seemed to bother those addicted to performance? Why the moment you stopped explaining yourself, the attacks increased? It wasn't because you were wrong. It was because your presence started to expose what their noise was hiding. You weren't overlooked because you lacked value. You were hidden because you carried too much. You weren't dismissed because you were weak. You were protected because you were dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. They couldn't see what God was developing beneath your stillness. Remember the late nights you wept into the silence, unsure if your prayers ever reached the heavens? The days you smiled in public but bled in private? The seasons where you watched others rise with applause while you stayed rooted in a secret place? That wasn't rejection, that was refinement. Just like Joseph, who was thrown into the pit by those who should have protected him, Genesis 37. You've been through betrayals that felt like burial, but the pit wasn't the end. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done. Genesis 50:20. Do you see now that it was all working for you, not against you? Let me tell you about Damaris, a once homeless teen from Sao Paulo. She carried a vision in her heart no one else could see. She cleaned offices by night, studied coding by day, and often skipped meals to keep her data plan active. 10 years later, She's now the founder of a non-profit that teaches tech to underprivileged girls in South America. No funding, no famous last name, just obedience, just Mantle. And then there's Leonardo da Vinci, a man misunderstood by his own generation. He was called erratic, obsessive, but he drew helicopters before flight was even possible. You too have designs the world can't yet recognize, but heaven already stamped them approved. You feel the weight, don't you? Like pressure inside your bones, a fire that refuses to die. That's not anxiety, that's activation. That's divine blueprint turning into divine movement. You weren't being delayed. You were being downloaded. You've carried burdens others never noticed. Your tears watered the seeds of future harvests. Your discernment was sharpened in hidden places. You are not late. You are on God's time. Can you sense it? The shift. The echo in your spirit telling you something sacred is near. You're about to walk into rooms your resume doesn't qualify you for, receive calls you didn't apply for, be favored in places you've never stepped foot in, because heaven was always your promoter. The wealth that's coming is not for applause, but for alignment, not to validate your worth, but to confirm your warfare wasn't wasted, because you didn't survive just to tell a story. You survived to live in the fulfillment of it. There will come a moment, chosen one, when the noise around you will fall silent, not because the world has changed, but because you have risen above the frequency that once demanded your explanation. You won't need to argue, defend, or even prove a single thing. Have you noticed how the most powerful trees don't shout their presence? They simply stand, unmoved, rooted, and undeniably seen. That's the kind of peace you're stepping into. A peace that is loud in its stillness. A presence that shifts atmospheres without saying a word. A light that testifies without needing applause. What if everything you've endured wasn't meant to prove your worth, but to prepare your frame to carry something divine? You're not just stepping into financial overflow, you're being entrusted with a divine mantle. One woven with threads of obedience, scars turned to oil, and prayers prayed in silence. And this mantle isn't just about you, it's about what God will do through you. Remember Joseph, betrayed, sold, imprisoned, yet in due season he was elevated not for revenge, but for provision. God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. Genesis 45:5. Can you see now why it took so long? Why the doors were closed until your structure could support the weight of generational change? You're not being promoted because you wanted wealth. You're being positioned because you're ready to fund the future of the kingdom, to break the silent curses over bloodlines, and to rebuild spiritual infrastructures that have collapsed under decades of neglect. You're becoming the answer to prayers your ancestors didn't even know how to articulate. Let me tell you about Gabriel. He used to work double shifts at a shipping warehouse, barely affording gas and rent. No degree, no safety net. But what he had was discipline, compassion, and a tithing envelope that stayed full even when his fridge was empty. 1 year later, he's now leading a logistics startup that donates 30% of profits to orphanages and refugee missions. Nobody clapped when he was invisible, but heaven moved when he stayed faithful. Do you know what Saint Oscar Romero, the Archbishop of El Salvador, once said before his martyrdom? Aspire not to have more, but to be more. And now, so will you. This isn't a showy rise, it's a sacred unveiling. You're not waiting for the money anymore. The wealth has been waiting for you, waiting for your ego to break so your spirit could rise, waiting for your heart to be untangled from pride, from people-pleasing, from impulsive desire, waiting for your house to be built not on sand, but on stone. Like a vineyard hidden in the hills, your harvest was never late. It was just growing deeper roots while no one was watching. Now the rains have come, the season has turned, and when it all happens, the only explanation you'll need is this: it was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Psalm 118:23. You didn't just go through those losses because life was random. You were trusted with the test. And why? Because heaven had already signed your name next to a transfer of influence, of wealth, of mantle. That weight you felt in secret. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Do you remember those nights you cried, not because you were weak, but because you were strong for too long? When you smiled while holding the splinters of your faith together like glass? That wasn't failure. That was the test. The kind that only chosen ones are given. The kind that doesn't ask for your opinion, but demands your obedience. Think of Abraham asked to offer Isaac on the altar, not because God wanted a child's blood, but because heaven wanted to know, can you trust the promise even when it looks like it's being taken? Abraham proved he could. And in return, God gave him not only a son, but generations like stars in the sky. Genesis 22:17. You too have stood at that altar, watching dreams tied in sacrifice, unsure if they'd rise again. But here's the secret. Only those chosen for something greater are tested like that. There's a woman I met in Atlanta named Clarice. For years, she worked at a non-profit, barely making enough to survive. Everyone told her to leave. Why stay where there's no money? But what they didn't know was that Clarice had a vision. She used to write plans for global impact on the back of recycled receipts during her lunch breaks. Today, she oversees a multi-million-dollar fund supporting small ministries across rural America. Why? Because she didn't run from the test. She passed it. Do you feel that stirring in your soul when you hear stories like hers? That quiet sense of familiarity. It's not just admiration, it's recognition. You see your reflection in their breakthrough. You've been trusted with similar fire. It's easy to want the harvest, but can you stay in the field when it feels like nothing is growing? Can you trust God's silence as much as His favor? In the early 1900s, a painter named Hilma af Klint created mystic abstract works years before anyone understood them. She believed she was painting not just for her generation, but for a future that would finally see. She died unknown. But today, her works are displayed in the Guggenheim and studied by scholars worldwide. Sometimes your test is simply this: can you keep building even if they don't understand you yet? David had the oil long before he had the throne. The anointing didn't come with instant applause. It came with isolation, with betrayal, with hiding in caves. Have you not lived some of those caves yourself? Rooms where your name was never mentioned, but your obedience still echoed. That, beloved, was the training ground of kings. There's a story I need to tell you about Jalen, a once homeless young man in Houston who used to write affirmations on pieces of cardboard behind an abandoned gas station. Every morning, he'd speak out loud promises that no one believed. But heaven was listening. One afternoon, a retired teacher named Mrs. Gaines noticed him, struck by his words. She took a photo. That photo went viral. Within months, Jalen was invited to speak at conferences, then to consult for a startup. Today, he owns a wellness brand employing over 40 formerly homeless youth. The test became the testimony. And still, the question hangs in the air like incense. Are you ready for the transfer that's been waiting on you? Because it's not just about money, it's about mantle. Money is the overflow. Mantle is the mission. Wealth doesn't make the calling easier. It amplifies its weight. Are you built to carry what others only admire from a distance? When God gives a transfer, He first checks your posture. Not the posture of your platform, but of your spirit. Have you remained soft when it was easier to grow hard? Did you choose humility when offense knocked on your door? There's a quote by Pope John Paul II that often goes unnoticed. Darkness can only be scattered by light. Hatred can only be conquered by love. That's what God checks before transfer. Can you still walk in light after standing in storms? You've been through droughts, through delay, through dismissal, but you didn't die there. And that's exactly why the transfer is yours, because what killed others refined you. Picture the forging of a sword, how it must be thrust into fire, then pounded, then cooled, then shaped again. That's what God was doing with you. He wasn't ignoring you, He was sharpening you. Now you're not just ready to receive, you're ready to wield. Imagine a volcano, dormant on the surface but beneath, a pressure building slowly, silently. That's what obedience looks like in seasons of silence, a power that seems invisible until the moment of divine eruption. And when it comes, no one can deny it. Let's talk about Dr. Edith Eva Eger, a Holocaust survivor who later became a renowned psychologist and author. She once said, "Your pain is not your identity. Your identity is who you become in response to it." That's what this transfer's about, not what you've endured, but how you've allowed it to refine you. You didn't just survive the furnace, you became gold inside it. Now the transfer isn't a maybe, it's a movement. But here's the divine twist. The wealth was never the reward. You were. The test was never about the money. It was always about who you'd become when the stage finally lit up. Would you still carry the same reverence, the same resilience, the same heart that once served in silence? Because heaven isn't funding ego. Heaven funds impact. Now doors are opening not because you knocked harder, but because the weight you carry matches the door frame they were built for. Think of an eagle, not flapping in panic, but soaring with invisible wind currents, waiting for the right air to lift. That's what your spirit has done. You didn't beg for blessing. You aligned for it. God is transferring wealth to those who can steward it, authority to those who won't abuse it, and mantles to those who won't mistake it for fame. You've been trusted with the test. Now heaven says, release the transfer. You've come so far, chosen one. And I don't mean in distance, I mean in depth, in obedience, in weight. You didn't just survive a season, you outlasted a proving ground. You've heard every whisper telling you that maybe it was all in your head, that maybe this calling was too big, too bold, too unlikely. But deep inside, something holy refused to let you fold. This isn't the end of the story. This is the unveiling of what heaven has always known about you. The mantle you're about to carry isn't just a financial mantle, it's spiritual infrastructure. It's the merging of kingdom wealth and kingdom wisdom, forged through silence, through warfare, through invisible faith. And now, the time of public demonstration has come, not for show, but for impact, not for applause, but for legacy. You've walked through too many nights with empty pockets, but a full spirit. You've smiled through brokenness. You've built through lack. You've given when you didn't even have. That wasn't weakness. That was preparation. It wasn't poverty. It was purity. Because now what God is about to release into your hands will no longer confuse you. You won't be seduced by it. You'll steward it. You've been trained to walk through rooms you once only dreamed of. You've learned the tone of heaven through seasons of being misjudged on earth. The noise never made you louder. The silence never made you smaller. You didn't have to shout to be seen. You stayed planted, and God took root with you. Now, the divine transfer has begun. But hear me, this transfer isn't just going to fill your bank account. It's going to shake your bloodline. It's going to build sanctuaries where there was once silence. It's going to clothe the naked, fund the broken, rebuild what religion abandoned. You are not stepping into a season of accumulation. You're stepping into a season of assignment. And you'll know it's from God because you won't have to chase it. You won't have to manipulate it. You won't have to explain it. It will come quietly. But it will come clearly. This kind of favor has fingerprints, and they look like obedience. This kind of wealth won't be posted. It will be planted in homes, in communities, in ministries, in minds. This kind of elevation doesn't require noise, just the kind of peace that makes people whisper. Something about them changed, and I don't think they did it alone. You didn't just pass the test of time, you passed the test of character. And so now, I want to bless you with remembrance. Let your soul recall every moment it nearly gave up. Let your heart remember every yes that cost you, every no that separated you, every step that led you deeper, not higher. It was all training for this. Let it settle now. You're not going back. You're not repeating old cycles. You're not begging for the table. You are becoming the table. You are about to employ people whose resumes look like your past. You are about to answer prayers you forgot you even prayed. You are about to shift the atmosphere of generations that never knew your name, but will live under your covenant. And it's not because you're perfect, it's because you said yes. Chosen one, you weren't just rescued, you were raised. You weren't just called, you were conditioned. You weren't just told to wait, you were trusted to carry what others would have fumbled. You were trained in places that looked empty but were full of power. You were developed in the dark. And now the light is only confirmation of what heaven already finished. This divine mantle is not decoration, it's delegation. You will be funded, but you will also fund. You will be seen, but you will also see. You will walk in rooms not to impress, but to reform. Because that's what a divine millionaire does. They don't hoard, they heal. You're about to do in months what others couldn't do in decades. Not because you're better, but because you're aligned. Not because you planned for it, but because you were positioned. You are not entering this next season because of hustle. You're entering it because of covenant, and covenant can't be cancelled. It can't be copied. It can't be sold. So now, breathe. You made it through the wilderness of proving. Now it's time to enter the Canaan of provision. And if this word found your heart today, if it lit something in your spirit, if it stirred tears you didn't expect, don't keep it to yourself. Someone else needs to be reminded that obedience was never in vain. Go ahead and like this video if it spoke to you. Share it with someone you know is on the edge of purpose. And leave a comment below. Just type 777 if you know you're walking into something holy, something weighty, something real. And if you've already subscribed to this channel, thank you. Thank you for walking with this space, for lending your spirit, for being part of a digital sanctuary that reaches across time zones, algorithms, and language. If you've ever supported through super thanks, I honor your seed. It means more than you know. But even if all you've ever done was pause long enough to listen, thank you. I know you had thousands of things to watch, but your spirit knew where to stop. You're not here by accident. You're here because heaven sent for you. So as we close this word, I speak blessing over your hands. May they build what lasts. I speak blessing over your voice. May it carry healing. I speak blessing over your legacy. May it outlive you. I declare you will carry this mantle with strength, with grace, with humility. I declare you will not break under the weight. You will rise under it. The world may call you wealthy, but heaven calls you worthy. Go now, chosen one. You've waited long enough. The mantle is yours, and the transfer has already begun.